A fiery debate unfolds on live TV. Millions watching. The liberal host leans in, smirking, ready to embarrass Barron Trump. With a mocking tone, he throws out a sarcastic jab, expecting laughter. But within seconds, the entire room falls silent. Because of Barron's response? No one saw it coming. The studio lights beamed down, the cameras rolled, and the audience sat eagerly, waiting for a heated exchange. The topic of discussion: politics, leadership, and the future of America. But while the debate should have been about ideas, it quickly became clear that the liberal host had a different agenda. From the moment Barron Trump spoke, the interruptions began. The host, an experienced media personality known for his sharp tongue and relentless questioning, smirked as he cut Barron off mid-sentence. "Now, come on, Barron. You don't really believe that, do you?" the host said, shaking his head in exaggerated disbelief. Barron, poised and composed, simply smiled and continued. But the host wasn't done. "Let's be honest here," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "You're only sitting in that chair because of your last name. You're not a politician, not a leader, just a kid who grew up in a golden tower. What do you really know about the struggles of everyday Americans?" The audience chuckled. Some even clapped. They expected Barron to fumble, to show inexperience, to get rattled. But Barron didn't flinch. Instead of rushing to defend himself, he leaned back, nodding slightly, as if he was carefully weighing his next words. The host took his silence as weakness. He pressed further. "See, this is what I mean. You hesitate because you don't have an answer. People like you think leadership is just about being born into privilege. But let's be real. What challenges have you ever faced?" The crowd murmured, some smirking, others watching intently. Still, Barron remained unfazed. He could have fired back with anger. He could have gone on the defensive. But instead, he did something no one expected. He waited. The host, sensing control of the conversation, leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension. "You can't answer, can you? Because deep down, even you know I'm right." More laughter. But then, Barron finally spoke. And what he said next? It wiped the smug look right off the host's face. The tension in the studio thickened. The host, a well-known liberal commentator, leaned forward in his chair, a smug smile playing on his lips. He had been waiting for this moment. This was his chance to put Barron Trump in his place, to prove that he was nothing more than a privileged kid trying to play in a world of real politics. "You know, Barron," the host said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "it must be fascinating growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by luxury, never knowing what it's like to struggle. Tell me, have you ever had to work a real job? Have you ever faced a single real challenge in your life?" The audience chuckled, some nervously, some fully enjoying the spectacle. This was what they had come to see: the young Trump being taken down a notch. Barron didn't flinch. He simply sat there, hands folded on the desk, his expression unreadable. The host took that as a sign to push further. "I mean, let's be honest," he continued, feigning sympathy. "People like you don't understand what it's like to be ordinary. You've never had to worry about rent, about medical bills, about putting food on the table. So, tell me, how exactly do you think you can relate to the struggles of the average American?" A few audience members nodded. The host could sense the energy shifting in his favor. He was winning. Barron was cornered, forced to acknowledge his privilege. But Barron didn't bite. He simply listened. And that only made the host more determined. "Let's not pretend," he pressed on, his voice growing sharper. "We both know the only reason you're sitting here The only reason anyone cares what you have to say is because of your last name. Take that away. And what's left? Who even are you? The room fell silent. For a moment, even the most vocal audience members hesitated. The air felt heavier. The host had gone for the kill. The camera zoomed in on Barron's face. This was it. The moment everyone was waiting for. Would he snap? Would he stumble? Would he fire back in anger? But instead, something unexpected happened. Barron smiled. Not a smirk, not a nervous grin. A calm, knowing smile. And in that moment, the energy in the room shifted. The host, expecting a defensive reaction, suddenly found himself in unfamiliar territory. Barron leaned forward, finally breaking his silence. His voice was steady, clear. So, you're saying my worth is determined by my last name? The host opened his mouth to respond, but Barron continued before he could. Tell me, how much of your career is built on tearing others down? How much of your success comes from creating division instead of unity? The audience murmured. Some leaned in, intrigued. This wasn't the weak, stammering response they had expected. Barron's expression didn't change. You say I don't understand struggle? Maybe you're right. I've had opportunities that many haven't. But does that mean I don't care? Does that mean I don't want to make a difference? Silence. The host shifted in his seat, suddenly less comfortable than before. And let's talk about privilege, Barron continued, because you sit here, in a cushy studio, behind a microphone, with millions watching. You have power, influence. So, tell me, how often do you use that privilege to help others? Or is it just easier to mock people like me? The audience didn't laugh this time. The host, visibly unsettled, forced a chuckle. That's not what we're talking about. Isn't it? Barron interrupted, his voice unwavering. The host had spent years dominating conversations, controlling the narrative. But for the first time, he found himself speechless. The camera panned to the audience. Their expressions had changed. The laughter was gone. Now, they were listening. And that's when it became clear. Barron Trump hadn't just defended himself. He had turned the entire conversation upside down. And what happened next would leave everyone in that room stunned. The air in the studio had shifted. The host, who moments ago was in complete control, suddenly found himself at a loss. His smirk was gone. His confidence wavered. Barron Trump, sitting across from him, remained calm. There was no anger in his eyes, no flustered reaction, just quiet certainty. The audience, sensing something remarkable was about to happen, leaned in. Barron finally spoke. His voice was steady, deliberate. I could fire back at you. I could match your sarcasm with my own. But what would that accomplish? The host blinked. He hadn't expected this. Barron continued, his words carrying weight. You're right. I've had privileges. I won't deny that. But privilege doesn't define a person. Character does. What you choose to do with your opportunities, how you treat others, how you respond in moments like these, that's what really matters. The host shifted in his seat. He was used to political figures dodging or deflecting. But Barron wasn't playing that game. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He was just honest. You mock me because of my last name, Barron said, his gaze unwavering. But you never stopped to ask who I actually am. A murmur rippled through the audience. The host opened his mouth, trying to regain control, but Barron wasn't done. I don't expect you to respect me. That's your choice. But what I will say is this: kindness, humility, and integrity. Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of strength. And if standing firm in those values makes me an easy target for mockery, so be it. Silence. Not a single chuckle. Not a single scoff. The audience was hooked. The host, now visibly uncomfortable, glanced at the camera, as if searching for an escape. But there wasn't one. Barron had turned the moment around, not with anger, not with insults, but with wisdom far beyond his years. And at that moment, something shifted. The audience wasn't laughing at him anymore. They were listening. The host, once so sure of his power, now had no idea what to say. Because for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. And what happened next would change everything. For the first time since the show started, the host was speechless. His smug expression had vanished. The confidence that once dripped from his every word, gone. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting toward the cameras as if searching for a way out. Barron Trump hadn't reacted the way he expected. No anger, no defensiveness, no stumble. Instead, Barron had turned the moment around with grace, wisdom, and something far more dangerous to a man like this: truth. The audience knew it. The host knew it. And the silence in the studio was deafening. The host cleared his throat, forcing a nervous chuckle. "Well, he started, trying to regain control. But it was too late. The shift had already happened. The respect of the audience was no longer his. It belonged to Barron. The host attempted to move on, quickly steering the conversation elsewhere. "All right, let's talk about something else. Let's get back to—" But the audience wasn't ready to let it go. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some shook their heads, unimpressed by the host's weak attempt at recovery. Others exchanged glances, realizing they had just witnessed something rare, something real. And then it happened. A slow clap. One person in the audience started it, then another, until suddenly the entire room erupted into applause. The host forced a tight smile, nodding as if he was still in control. But his eyes told a different story. He knew. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a moment that would be replayed, shared, and remembered. And as the cameras kept rolling, the internet was already doing its thing. Within minutes, social media exploded. Barron Trump just put that host in his place, with pure class. "Wow, didn't expect this. Barron handled that like a pro." This interview will go down in history. Hashtags flooded Twitter. Clips went viral. News outlets picked up the story. And the host? He could only sit there, forced to watch as the world saw exactly what had just happened. He had underestimated Barron Trump, and now the whole world knew it. The interview was over. The cameras had stopped rolling. But the real show, it was just beginning. Within minutes, the internet had exploded. Clips of Barron's graceful response were spreading like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about it. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Every platform was flooded with reactions. Barron Trump just schooled that host, without even raising his voice. This is what real class looks like. Take notes. I may not agree with him on everything, but wow! That was powerful. Even those who had never paid much attention to Barron were now watching the clip on repeat, analyzing every second. And the reactions? They were unanimous. The world had just witnessed something rare in politics and media. True composure under pressure. Barron didn't just win the debate, he won people's respect. But while social media celebrated his maturity, one person was feeling the heat: the host himself. His once loyal audience wasn't as loyal anymore. Comment sections under his past videos were flooded with criticism. "You got humbled on your own show." "Yikes." "Mocking a young man just to score cheap points." "How embarrassing." "This aged badly." Barron made you look foolish. It wasn't just online backlash, real-world consequences followed. Sponsors of the show started reevaluating their partnership. Producers held emergency meetings, discussing how to contain the damage. And then, after hours of radio silence, the host finally spoke out. A tweet. Just a few sentences. I may have gone too far in last night's interview. My intention was never to insult anyone. I respect all my guests. If my words came off wrong, I apologize. But it was too late. People saw right through it. The apology wasn't genuine. It was damage control. And the viewers? They weren't buying it. If my words came off wrong, that's not an apology. That's an excuse. Respect all your guests? LOL, we all saw the clip. This is what happens when arrogance meets grace. You lost. Meanwhile, Barron, he didn't even need to respond, because his actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. He didn't retaliate. He didn't play the victim. He simply stood his ground with dignity. And now, the world was taking notice. People were seeing him in a new light, not just as the son of a former president, but as a young man who had just proven himself on a massive stage. And as the news cycle continued, one thing was clear. The host had tried to humiliate Barron Trump, but in the end, he had only humiliated himself. The debate had ended. The cameras had stopped. But the impact of that moment? It would last far beyond the studio walls. Barron didn't need to argue. He didn't need to attack. He didn't even need to defend himself aggressively. His dignity alone had won the battle. In a world where heated arguments and insults dominate the headlines, Barron proved that wisdom, composure, and intelligence still matter. The host had tried to belittle him, to make him stumble. But in the end, Barron's grace stood taller than any insult thrown his way. And the lesson was clear. True strength isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can remain unshaken when the world tries to bring them down. As the screen fades to black, Barron walks away, head held high. Dignity and intelligence always win over hate. If you believe in standing strong with grace, hit that like button and subscribe.